السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. Welcome back, everyone, to Dreams Come True. Alhamdulillah, we are making our way through this blessed surah, Surah Yusuf. We are up to verse 77. So we can change the screen, inshallah, to verse 77. And mashallah, I'm really proud of the ones that come on time and mashallah have stuck through the surah, through these many months, including Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu accept every moment of it from us all, inshallah. Okay, so let's look at verse 77. Qalu, they said. So this is the scene, if you recall, where the cup has just been found from the belongings, the bag, the camel bag of Binyamin. The brothers are shocked. This is something they were certainly not expecting, right? So this is the reaction or the response to the cup being found from the bag of their younger half-brother Binyamin. Qalu, they said, the brothers of Yusuf said, if Yasriq steals, he steals or he has stolen, Binyamin, faqad, certainly, saraqa, stole, akhun, a brother, lahu, of his, his full brother, min, from qabl, before, so asarra, hid, ha, it, so concealed it or hid it, Yusuf, so Yusuf concealed it or hid it, fi, in nafsihi, his own self, wa, and lam, did not, yubdiha, make it apparent, lahum, to them. Qala, he said, so he didn't express himself openly, he kept it within himself. He said to himself in his own heart, Qala, he said, Antum, you all, sharrun, more evil, makana, you are or in a more worse position, makana, place or position. So you all are in a much worse position. Wallahu, and Allah, a'lamu, is all aware, bima, be with ma, that, tasifun, with regards to that, you are describing. Tasifun, you are describing, from wasf, which is a description. Sifa is an adjective, something that describes. Tasifun, that you are describing. Verse 77. They said, no wonder that he steals, for a brother of his stole before. But Yusuf kept his reaction to himself. Okay, so what is it that he kept to himself? His reaction, his words. But Yusuf kept his reaction to himself without disclosing the truth to them. He merely said to himself, you are an evil lot. You are so bad, basically, in other words, right? Allah knows well the truth of the accusation that you are making against me, to my face, so to speak. So, if you think about it, it's so evil what the brothers of Yusuf say about him at this point, not knowing that, they're saying it to Yusuf's face, who is the Aziz, not knowing any of that. So they're like, oh, if Binyamin has committed this theft, a full brother of his also committed theft. So yeah, it makes sense that he would do something like this, right? This should not come as a surprise to us. His full brother, his real brother, referring to Yusuf, had also committed theft before, right? So Qutb explains why they, accuse Binyamin's full brother Yusuf of stealing at this point in time specifically. He says, turning back to Joseph's brothers, whose grudge against Joseph had been aroused, we find them trying their best to deny having anything to do with the theft, while they attach it to the other branch of their father's children. They said, if he has stolen, well, a brother of his had stolen previously. Okay, so they're lying outright to Egypt's chief minister in order to deny the responsibility for an embarrassing act. They try to absolve themselves of having anything to do with Yusuf and his younger brother. Their action shows that they still harbor a grudge against both Yusuf and his brother, hence they put the blame squarely on these two. And although he also clarifies how their position with regards to their little brother and dissociating themselves from Binyamin. This is the purpose of them mentioning Yusuf's quote unquote, incident of stealing at this point. They want to disassociate themselves from Binyamin completely and from the act that he has apparently got caught in. We have nothing to do with him and what he did. If he did this, well, a full brother of his also did something like that. So it's that side of our dad's family. It's not us, right? And Maududi actually thinks that this was a false accusation that the clever brothers invented on the spot. Okay, so that's his opinion, is that there was no such incident in the past, or false accusation, obviously, against Yusuf in the past. Rather, they just had made it up on the spot in order to have a way of dissociating themselves from Binyamin, right? But it is an instance, he says, of the malice these brothers bore to their stepbrothers. And also the answer to the question why Yusuf salam desired to keep his brother with him. The fact that they used Yusuf salam as the basis for dissociating themselves from both brothers, both Binyamin and Yusuf, right? They could have made up any other excuse if they were lying. They could have, wiggled out of that situation in any other way. But the fact that they used Yusuf salam and attributing, something false against him, showing him in this bad light, along with Binyamin, shows the kind of feelings that they had towards these two brothers. That age-old jealousy was still there. That grudge, unfortunately, was still there. And on the other side, think of Yusuf salam. Imagine how difficult it must have been for Yusuf salam to hear these words, right? More lies, more slander against his noble character. He's listening to this, hearing this from those who had committed the most wicked deed against him when they threw him off for dead, right? These lies are being spoken against him in his face by those to whom he's showing incredible grace, incredible hospitality, supplying them generously yet again for a second time, right? But subhanAllah, as this verse tells us, Yusuf salam is a full master of his self. He is a mountain of self-control. He's a mountain of restraint. You could not even elicit a tangible reaction from him in spite of the gravity and heaviness of these words, right? He simply bore their accusation without rebutting, without retorting, without saying something back, right? Something that they would have disliked to hear. He didn't even show that he was affected by it in the least. So he just thinks to himself, right? That you are in a worse position. Yani, after all these years, you are as evil as ever. You still harbor the decades-old grudges against Yusuf, against me, right? You still have this bad thinking towards your little brother, instead of insisting on his innocence, or knowing this must have been some mistake, or thinking anything other than what they did, which was affirming his guilt and explaining it by saying, oh, well, he's just acting like his brother, right? So this false accusation put them in a far worse position in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than those of the accused. So Yusuf salam's statement was in fact a statement of fact and not an insult. So it's not like he's insulting them. When he's thinking to himself, Antum sharrun makana, you are in a much worse position. Yani, Allah knows the truth and you are lying. So your false accusation is actually putting all of you in a far worse position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So it's not an insult, it's actually a statement of fact, right? Wallahu a'lamu bima tasifun. And Allah knows best what you allege. Allah knows best what you are talking about, right? So, he doesn't enter into any type of argument about their accusation. He doesn't, pay any attention to it whatsoever, because, he has nothing to do with it, because they don't know he's Yusuf, right? So he doesn't give any reaction whatsoever. The lesson that we can extract from this for ourselves is the part of self-control that we see Yusuf alayhi salam so masterfully employing and thereby elevating himself every single time. Every single time you restrain yourself and you don't do what you want to do, you don't say what you want to say, you're actually elevating yourself, right? So it's actually taking you to a place you want to arrive at, right? A higher place where there's a better version of yourself, right? When you're climbing the mountain of self-improvement and getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the way we get there are in ways that are difficult for the nafs, right? Because the nafs wants to answer back. The nafs wants to sting back. That's really what the nafs wants to do, right? Because when someone says something insulting, that comment stings us. So we want to cause similar pain to the other person in an effort to soothe our own pain, to decrease the feeling of that sting, right? But elevation is not in answering back, which will, yes, reduce the sting, but then that's all that it will do, right? But not answering back, that requires giving up that part of your nafs that wants to respond. And it's always in giving up a part of your nafs that you rise up and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So let's challenge ourselves to give ourselves up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How beloved is that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? In that giving up of our nafs, of ourself, that's where nobility lies, right? So next time we're tempted to retort back, and we have the perfect comeback, we have the perfect, comment, and we may even be right, and we may have been wrongly insulted. Think, what would you rather have? Would you rather have the satisfaction, for your nafs that you'll get from, giving that perfect comeback, perfect response, or would you rather have the satisfaction, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So something to think about. What is going to bring true long-term lasting tuma'nina, lasting satisfaction? Isn't it better to give up that comment at that moment and instead opt to hear at the moment of our death something much more pleasing to our ears, right? That moment of death, which is the only moment that counts. Would we rather not hear, Ya ayyatuha nafsul mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati? Isn't it much, much better to hear those words? Oh, soul who is at rest, who is at peace. And your soul, your nafs, cannot be at peace at the moment of death unless you had habituated that nafs to find tuma'nina, to find peace in those things that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's that nafs that has worked hard and given up its rest and its desires and its wanting to answer back, that's going to hear these words at the moment of its return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya. This is the chance when you get to come back, right? Return to your pleased and well-pleasing. Fadkhuli fi ibadi, enter into my servants and enter into my paradise. Nothing is worth jeopardizing that moment of peace and tranquility we can have at the moment of our death and entering into the next realm with full tuma'nina, with full peace. So let's challenge ourselves this summer to not give into our nafs and answer back, but to give up our nafs and rise up and elevate in hopes that this will be said to us, inshallah, at the only moment that counts, right? Okay, let's look at verse 78. قالوا, they said, Ya ayyuha, O al-Aziz, yani Yusuf alayhi salam is being addressed. Inna, indeed, lahu, for him, aban, a father, shaykhan, elderly, kabira, big, very elderly. So khudh, take ahadana, one of us, makana, in his place instead. Inna, indeed, we, naraka, see you, from al-muhsinin, the doers of good. 78. They said, "O powerful chief, Yani al-Aziz, his father is an age-stricken man," right? He's very elderly, and in order that he may not suffer, please take one of us in his stead, in place of him. We indeed consider you an excellent person, right? So muhsinin often translated as the doers of good. It's really doers of excellence. It's really people that are committed to ihsan, doing things in the best way. So you can imagine the condition of the brothers of Yusuf at this point. Yeah, they have this grudge against Yusuf and Binyamin, but they remember their father. They remember the pledge they had given to their father about the safety, ensuring the safety of Binyamin and bringing him back to him safely, right? So they're probably borderline panicking at this point, at the prospect of having to go back without Binyamin. How on earth are we going to face our father with this, right? So what they must have recalled at that moment, the solemn pledge they had given to their father when he made that pledge a condition to his consent of allowing Binyamin to go with them, right? That you will bring him back to me. This is the promise, this is the pledge that I'm making with you in the name of Allah, right? You will bring him back to me unless the worst befalls you. Yani if you are yourselves overwhelmed and overcome, that you yourselves are unable to return, that would be the only, exception. So they remember that pledge. The pledge is haunting them at this point, and they appeal to the great Aziz, right? To Yusuf, knowing that's Yusuf, of course. Please, he has an elderly father who loves him very, very much. Ibn Kathir mentions this, that father is comforted by the presence of Binyamin from the son that he has lost. And the only consolation our father has in his grief of having lost Yusuf alayhi is this son of his, Binyamin, right? So we can't do this to our father. We will not be able to deal with him. So please take one of us in his place. It's a pretty desperate plea, right? They're appealing to his ihsan. Inna naraka min al-muhsinin. Indeed, surely we see you to be from among the muhsinin. So they appeal to his ihsan. You're so kind, you're so gracious. Certainly you're going to be understanding of our situation. Please just make this, exception for us. Take one of us in place of Binyamin. Now, the concept of muhsinin, of being a muhsin, something that comes up in the Quran. It's one of those categories, special categories of people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, right? So any category that Allah attaches his love to is a special category. It becomes a goal in our lives to then try to enter into that category. And the challenge of becoming a muhsin is definitely one of the greatest challenges for one's character. And it can only be shown and achieved through one's actions. Intentions are not enough, although they're rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to become a muhsin, you can't just intend it, you can't just talk about it, you can't just wish to be able to become it one day. But a muhsin becomes a muhsin, is a muhsin, when he or she actually, practically shows that in his or her actions. And what are those actions of ihsan? Warding off good with evil, replying to bad with good. Warding off evil with good. Big mistake. Apologize. Warding off evil with good. So someone does evil towards you, you do good for them instead. Very tall order. Someone insults you, is mean to you, you reply to them with goodness. Unkind treatment, you reply to it with kind treatment. So this is the highest, most difficult, most noble way of behaving and living your life, right? And so very few people achieve it. And it is prophetic. And therefore, these are the categories of people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And now we know, right? Because those whom Allah loves, they have to be very special people. These people that will be the people of Jannah, they have certain qualifications that make them Ahlul Jannah, right? You can't get into Harvard without certain qualifications. How are you going to make it to Jannah without having those sifat, the qualities, the qualifications of the people of Jannah? And these are some of those qualities. If you look at the character of Yusuf alayhi salam throughout the surah, his being a muhsin comes out over and over again. It is one of his most glaring features of his character, right? He is the definition of ihsan, whether it is the way he treats his brothers who had been so wicked to him. They themselves here are testifying, inna naraka min al-muhsinin. Indeed, we see you to be among the muhsinin. Or whether it is the prisoners that are with him in jail, they also describe him with the same characteristics. So he is the definition of muhsin. If anyone wants to learn how to become a muhsin, how to be a muhsin, is it possible to become a muhsin? There we have Ahsan al-Qasas, the star of which is Yusuf alayhi salam. If anyone wants to become a muhsin, then this is the place to be. This is the surah to be at, right? Okay, verse 79. Qala, he said, Yani, Yusuf alayhi salam said, Ma'adh Allah, I seek refuge in Allah, or Allah forbid, right? May Allah not allow this to happen, right? And that I were to na'khud, we were to take, illa, except man, the one, wajadna, we found our mata'ana, we found mata'ana, our merchandise, indahu, with him. Inna, indeed, we, even in that case, would be among la-zalimin, certainly among the zalimun, the zalimun, right? Among those who are oppressive or the wrongdoers. Okay, so 79. Joseph said, Allah forbid that we should seize any except him with whom we found our property. Were we to do so, we would surely be one of the wrongdoers. Okay. So yes, Yusuf alayhi salam is certainly among the muhsinin. He is kind, he is gracious, he is hospitable, but he is also fair, right? And so he says, Ma'ad Allah, right? I seek refuge in Allah from committing an act that would go against the spirit of justice, right? To seize other than the one in whose belongings their merchandise was found, that would clearly be unfair, right? Also notice how careful Yusuf alayhi salam is in talking about his brother, right? He's very careful about not speaking untruthfully about his brother, right? He doesn't say, I seek refuge in Allah to take anyone other than the thief. He doesn't say that. He said, it'd be wrong to take anyone other than the one with whom we found our belongings. So he never calls him a thief, right? It's very important that we are very careful with how we talk. And, sometimes we see even adults doing this, is that they'll just tell white lies here and there to coax their children or wiggle out of a situation where they could easily have made a statement that was not untrue, right? So there's a way to speak where you may not be disclosing the full truth because of a reason that calls for that, and at the same time not lie. So Maududi comments about this, and it's really, really important and practical for us, right? The use of the words with whom we found our property instead of the word thief is very significant. Yusuf alayhi salam avoided the use of the word thief for his brother because he was not a thief, right? If he would have said that, he would have been lying. So this is called tawriya. It's a term which means to put a cover over a reality or to hide a reality. Such a practice is allowed by Muslim law under certain conditions with certain limitations. It may be practiced not to gain any selfish end, but to ward off some evil or to protect and save an oppressed person from some oppressor, provided that no other course might have been left except saying something against the truth or having a resort to a deceitful device. It is obvious that in such a case, a righteous person will not tell a blunt lie or resort to open deceit. That's the point, right? There may be situations in our lives where we can't fully disclose the full truth at that moment, but that doesn't mean we have to blatantly lie either. Okay, that's off limits. Believers don't lie. Muslims don't lie, right? There's no such thing as a white lie. We don't lie, period, right? So instead, he will say something or do something that might not be strictly truthful or strictly right, yet at the same time it is not a blunt lie, so that he might hide the reality to ward off the evil. Such a practice is lawful legally and morally, provided that it is not practiced to gain some personal or selfish end, but to ward off a greater evil with a lesser evil. Now, realistically, many of us, inshallah, are not going to be in such a situation. We ask Allah for afiyah, for well-being and safety and goodness. The point for us is there are many ways to not have to disclose the full truth at every moment, especially if there's a reason to withhold it, for some wisdom or for some benefit. But at the same time, to not overtly lie. And white lies are completely off limits. They are still lies. We shouldn't use terminology which is, not from our Islamic understanding. There's no such thing in Islam as a white lie, right? So why are we going to borrow from another moral framework and insert into ours to somehow provide justification for the practice? It's not from our ethics or morals to tell white lies, right? So Yusuf alayhi salam scrupulously fulfilled the conditions in this case. And he did not lie, nor did he fully disclose the truth because of a plan and a wisdom that he has in mind, right? He placed the cup in the pack of his brother with his consent, but he did not ask his servants to make a search of his pack and accuse him of theft. He didn't, instruct the servants to do that, right? It was a general search that was conducted for everybody. And then things happened as we saw. After this, when the servants brought the brothers before him as suspects, he quietly rose from his seat and began to make a search of their packs. Then afterwards, when the brothers requested that one of them should be taken instead of Benjamin, he answered them back in their own words that he would only detain the person in whose possession the cup was found and no one, and he would not take anyone else, right? Because if we were to do that, we were to seize someone else, in that case, inna idalla ghalimun. In that case, we would be among the ghalimun, the wrongdoers, because ghulm linguistically is to place something in other than its rightful location. So this is why shirk is described as ghulmun azim, as the greatest ghulm, because it's misplacing the rights of Allah and giving them to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by worshipping other than him, by calling on other than him, by sacrificing to other than him. So it's taking something and putting it in other than its rightful location. So here, if we were to seize someone, if we were to take someone other than the one in whose belongings we found our cup, then we would be guilty of dhulm. We would be guilty of misplacing punishment on one who was not deserving of it by taking an innocent man instead, right? So he does not give in to his pleas. He does not give in to even what when they speak about their elderly father, he doesn't give in to that. And that's because, as Qutb mentions, his aim, it's not that he doesn't have a soft spot for his father, of course he does, but he wants to teach the brothers a lesson, right? They are still, they still have a lot of problems. Let's just put it that way. So he needs to teach them a lesson. He wants to arouse their interest in the plan that he is preparing for them. And of course, this plan includes his father. And this will soon be disclosed, right? What Yusuf alayhi salam was planning through all of this. Let's look at verse 80. فَلَمَّا, so when they despaired, minhu, from him, yani from Yusuf alayhi salam, listening to their pleas, khalasu, they separated themselves, najiyah, and for the purpose of counseling or advising, holding a secret consultation among themselves. Qala, he said, kabiruhum, the eldest of them said, alam, don't, ta'lamu, do you not know, anna, that indeed, that surely, abakum, your father, qad, surely, akhada, took, alaykum, over you, mawthiqa, yani from you, mawthiqa, a solemn pledge, min Allah, from Allah, here in the name of Allah. It means in the name of Allah. Wa, and min, from qablu, before, ma, that which you فرطتم fell short, were deficient in. In what? في Yusuf, in Yusuf, yani with regards to having protected Yusuf. You had fallen short previously in your promise of protecting Yusuf, right? فلن, so not abraha, depart, al-ard. So actually it's not just not, it's like never. So I will certainly not depart al-arda, the land, hatta, until ya'dana, gives permission, li, for me, abi, my father, or yahkuma, rules, Allah, or Allah rules, Allah decides, Allah judges, li, for me. Wa, and huwa, he is khair, the best, al-hakimin, the best of those who judge. Verse 80. Then when they had despaired of Yusuf alayhi salam, they went to a corner and counseled together. The eldest of them said, do you not know that your father has taken a solemn promise from you in the name of Allah, and you failed in your duty towards Yusuf? So I will not depart from this land until my father permits me, or Allah pronounces his judgment in my favor. He is the best of those who judge. Okay. So their appeals are to no avail. And after they realized that, they huddled together privately away from everyone. Khalasu, they separated themselves. Najia, for a private conversation, secret consultation. They consulted, they're now consulting among themselves with great urgency. And the eldest of them says something, right? And the eldest, we find in Tafsir, Ibn Kathir mentions his name was either Rubil or Yehuda. And he's the eldest of them. And he is the one who, many years ago, the same brother that had dissuaded the others from killing Yusuf alayhi salam and instead throwing him in the well. So he's the one who had persuaded them not to kill Yusuf, rather to throw him in the well. So he's very troubled. Obviously, they're all troubled, and he's just, addressing the others with, don't you know your father has taken a solemn pledge from you regarding Binyamin's protection, that you promised him in the name of Allah that you were going to bring him back to you, except in the case that all of us were overwhelmed and encircled. And, this is not the case. We're not all overwhelmed. We're all able to go back, except for him. Right? Nothing is preventing us physically from returning. So that condition of the pledge is not in place, that exception, right? That none of us can go back. And so, okay, Binyamin didn't come back either. We're able to go back, but then how can we go back without him? And this is going to break the pledge. And then remember what you did with regards to Yusuf. Ma farrattum fi Yusuf, how you fell short and deficient, failed in your duty to protect Yusuf, right? Remember how you treated him. So Qutb mentions how he combines the two events, right? The current situation with Binyamin with regards to the pledge they'd given their father for bringing him back, and the broken promise with regards to Yusuf alayhi salam's protection, right? So he combines these two events and makes them the basis of yes, so it is the same brother that had said to not kill Yusuf alayhi salam earlier. Someone's asking that question. As we just mentioned a minute ago, that actually it is the same brother who is speaking now about, I'm not going to leave until my father permits me. This brother, his name is either Rubil or Yehuda, according to Tafsir. And he's the same one that many years ago had told the brothers who wanted to kill Yusuf that don't kill him. Let's just throw him in the well instead. So yes, it is the same brother. And so, he says, okay, this is enough for me to make this decision, which is to not leave Egypt. I cannot leave Egypt. I cannot meet my father until either he gives me permission to come back or Allah makes a judgment about my case. And then I would submit to that judgment that Allah makes, right? But I certainly do not have the ability to face my father like this, to go back without Binyamin. I can't do it. So I'm going to stay put right here in Egypt until father gives me permission to return. Ibn Kathir mentions, until my father gives me permission to return while he is pleased with me. So I'm not going to, go back to a situation where father is so unhappy and we've broken the promise, right? Or that Allah decides my case. Some Mufassirin have said he meant Allah decides my case with death for me, or yani I would die, or maybe I'll be able to come back later by myself or with my brother. For Allah is the best of judges, وَهُوَ خَيْرُ الْحَاكِمِينَ, right? Let's look at verse 81. Irji'u, go back, ila, to, return to, abikum, your father, fa, so, qulu, say, ya abana, oh, our father, inna banaka, inna, surely, or indeed, inna banaka, your son, saraqa, stole. Wa, and ma, did not, shahidna, we did not see, we didn't see him, illa, except bima, be with ma, with regards to alimna, we knew. Wa, and ma, not kunna, we were not, lil ghaib, with regards to for the unseen, and with regards to the unseen, hafidhin, protectors. This literal word to word translation is very difficult to follow, okay? So let's explain that. 81. So go back to your father and tell him, Father, your son has certainly been guilty of stealing. We did not see him stealing, okay? So this is the awkward part that I was doing the word to word for. Wama shahidna. Wama shahidna, we did not see him stealing. Illa bima alimna, but testify according to what we know. And obviously we had no power to keep watch over that which is altogether hidden from us, okay? So we didn't see him do it, but this is what we came to know about the situation, right? So here in 81, this eldest brother, either Rabil or Yehuda, whichever of the two his name was, he's decided to stay behind because he can't face his father. And he tells his brothers exactly what to do and what to say to their father, right? Go back to your father and inform him. So this is the eldest son speaking, the eldest brother speaking to his other brothers. Go back to your father and inform him that your son has stolen. And of course, they knew how hard it was going to be for their father to believe that, right? So this is why he's going to now give all of these proofs, right? And more explanations for themselves and why they're saying this. We didn't see him do it. We're only telling you, we're only testifying to what we came to know about the situation, right? There's actually another translation of this verse. So go back to your father and tell him, Father, your son has certainly been guilty of stealing. Ma shahidina, we did not see him stealing, but testify according to what we came to know. And obviously we had no power to keep watch over what is altogether hidden from us. Actually, it's pretty much, it's the same translation. It's different. It's the same one I read, but it's a little bit different from your translation on the screen. So, we don't know what the actual matter is. We don't know if there's something else going on that's hidden from us, right? This is what is apparent. And you'll find slightly different interpretations among the various tafasir for this. Sheikh Saadi has a slightly different take on it. He explains, وَمَا كُنَّا لِلْغَيْبِ حَافِظِينَ, we could not guard against the unforeseen, or we had no power to keep watch over that what is altogether hidden from us. He explains this like, we don't know the ghaib. Had we known the ghaib, had we known what was going to happen, we would not have insisted on bringing Binyamin with us in the first place, nor would we have given you a pledge for his safety. So he has a slightly different take on it. Ibn Kathir mentions the saying of Qatada and explaining this, that we could not know the unseen. He explains this by saying we did not know that your son had committed theft. And then Ibn Kathir also mentions another interpretation. We did not know that. So when I say that Ibn Kathir mentions another interpretation, it's not that Ibn Kathir is saying these things. He's mentioning different mufassirin from the Salaf, right? Various names from the previous generations that are authorities in tafsir that give their interpretation. So it's not necessarily him saying it, but he's relating the aqwal, the sayings, the interpretations of people that had authority to speak on tafsir, right? So another one that he mentions says, we did not know that Benjamin stole something that belonged to the king. We only stated the punishment of the thief, right? Like we didn't know that he had actually stolen. Like when they said to us, O people of the caravan, you were indeed thieves, and what is the punishment for the one who has stolen? We just told them the punishment that a thief gets in our law, but we had no idea that Benjamin had actually stolen, right? And that he was actually going to get the punishment that we suggested, right? So anyhow, Qutb summarizes all of this very nicely. Basically, the elder brother asks that the rest go back to the father and tell him in all frankness that his son had stolen something and was subsequently detained on account of this. That was all they knew. If their brother was innocent, and if there was something different about the whole situation, it was certainly hidden from them, and they could not be answerable for what God in his wisdom chose to conceal from them. They had not expected anything like this to happen. It could never have been foreseen. If their father doubted what they said and did not believe them, you could ask the people of the capital city of Egypt, and this is going to come up now, where they had been, and the people in the caravan, and their caravan. They were not alone on this business. Indeed, there were many caravans traveling to and from Egypt, buying its grain in those years of poor harvest. End quote. Right. So this references what's coming up in verse 82 now. Verse 82, وَاسْأَلِ الْقَرْيَةَ, ask the town, al-qarya, the town, التي, that, kunna, we were, fiha, in it, وَالْعِيرِ, and the caravan, التي, that, أقبلنا, we came, fiha, in it, and inna, indeed we, la, surely, صادقون, those who tell the truth. 82. You may inquire of the dwellers of the city where we were, and of the people of the caravan with whom we traveled. We are altogether truthful in what we say. Okay, so ask the town, Yani ask the people of the town that we were in Egypt. They saw all of this unfold. Ask the caravan that we came back with. They all know about the case, right? They're all with us. We are telling the truth. Benjamin stole, he was taken captive as a compensation for his theft. We didn't do anything to him, right? You can hear the guilt that they have in how they're explaining themselves, over-explaining themselves, providing, proof after proof for their truth. And in this case, they are telling the truth, but they just can't be believed, right? It's like, even as they're going to say those words, simultaneously they understand why it would be so hard to believe them, right? And so they use these multiple proofs and linguistic emphases for their words. Wa inna, indeed we. So it's like surely, right? It's not like I'm telling the truth. I'm surely la sadiqun. The lam is also for emphasis, right? Normally we would just say, nahnu sadiqun, right? That we are truthful. But no, indeed we, inna, surely we, la, certainly are truthful, right? So they're really overemphasizing their case, because the guilt of the crime of Yusuf that they committed decades ago has not left them, right? It was one of the things that they just mentioned, the brother just mentioned in their private talk, right? How you were deficient, with regards to the protection of Yusuf alayhi salam. That guilt has not left them. So getting away, the lesson here for us is getting away with a crime or a sin doesn't mean that it will let you get away, right? It's going to claw away at you. It's going to gnaw away at you. It will stay with you and haunt you, as assuming that there are some remnants of a conscience, right, in the individual. And really, until you make amends, and we see the brothers of Yusuf have not yet made amends, even internally. And that's where the amends begin. The amends begin with recognizing the gravity. So we see some, tinges of that in the eldest brother. But overall, they are not reluctant to accuse Yusuf alayhi salam of theft when Benjamin is, quote unquote, caught with the cup, right? So they still harbor those old grudges. They are still not internally rectified. And it is towards that end that Yusuf is actually working on them, right? This whole grand plot, not disclosing his identity in the first meeting, continuing to keep his identity secret in the second meeting, and then retaining Binyamin. All of this is towards that end of rectification that Yusuf wants for his brothers. So he's actually working on them through all of this, right? And then we fast forward to Canaan, where Yaqub receives that very painful news. Okay, verse 83. All he said, Yani Yaqub said, Bal, surely sawalat, made seem fair to you, made seem okay to you, lakum, for you, anfusukum, your nufus, yourselves, made this amra, this matter. Yani, now Binyamin is detained on account of theft. Your nufus, yourselves your souls have tempted you to do something evil. They have made it easy for you to do this. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ. So sabr, patience, jameel, beautiful. So beautiful patience. Asa, perhaps Allah, and that ya'tiyani, will bring me, be him, with them, jami'a. Yani perhaps Allah will bring them all back to me, jami'a, all of them. Innahu, indeed he, huwa, he, al-alim, all-knowing, al-hakim, all-wise. Okay, 83. So after this, we are fast forwarded to the moment where Yaqub receives the painful news. It's a very painful verse. After Yaqub receives this heart-wrenching information about Binyamin. And subhanAllah, he says the same exact thing that he had said years ago when the brothers had lied about Yusuf salam been eaten by a wolf, right? Ibn Kathir mentioned that when they went back to Yaqub and told them what happened, he did not believe them and thought that this was a repetition of what they had done to Yusuf salam, right? Madudi explains that is, you readily believe that my son, whom I know to be of noble character, had committed the theft of a cup. Like, how could you believe that? How could you accept that? You have behaved in his case just as you behaved in the case of his elder brother. You made away with him and then pretended without any pangs of conscience that a wolf had devoured him. And now with the same ease, you tell me that the other has committed theft? Bal sawalat lakum anfusukum amra. Nay, but your own selves have beguiled you into something. Sawalat, from sawala, is to make something bad appear good, something evil appear beautiful, something that entices you so that something that was bad is now justified, so you commit it. Something that was evil is beautified, so you engage in it, right? This is a classic shaitani tactic, okay? Classic shaitani tactic, because every time we commit a sin, there's a thought process that goes on in our minds where we justify that sin before engaging in it. Otherwise, we would not even enjoy it, right? So it has to be made less bad or even good or even beautiful or, something that you want to engage in order for you to want to engage in it or do it. So Yaqub alayhi salam, he knows. I know that neither story is true. I know you lied when you came with the false blood on the shirt of Yusuf alayhi salam, that he's devoured by a wolf. And I know that my son has not stolen either, right? And subhanAllah, it's amazing how he says the same exact words. فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ, right? That I'm going to adopt and resort and deal with this through beautiful patience. Exactly what he had said after losing Yusuf alayhi salam. Although it's the same thing that happens to him, exact same thing now with the other son of his is happening to him. And the same exact way, it's the brothers that take one, never bring him back. Now, same thing with Binyamin. Imagine, God forbid, someone in that situation today, when their patience is tried, especially when it's tried with the same thing. What do we tend to say? I can't take it anymore, right? I don't even think we think about saying sabrun jameel, right? Although it's a beautiful thing to adopt now that we have studied Surah Yusuf, let's try to make its words part of our own vocabulary in our daily lives, right? When something stings, to not answer back. When something difficult appears, to try to say sabrun jameel, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to not be tried. But what do we tend to default? We tend to default into, I can't take it anymore. This is too much, right? Especially if it's the same exact thing happening for a second time. So Sabrun Jameel, as we explained when it first appeared, it's sabr that is beautiful. Why is it beautiful? Because it has no resentment in it. There is no displeasure betrayed as you're practicing it. There is no restlessness, right? Even though for Yaqub alayhi salam, it's a wound upon the wound, right? The first wound of Yusuf has not healed, and now it's been poked once again, and there's a second wound on top of it now. And so the sabrul jameel, that betrays no displeasure, that has no restlessness, what does that mean? It means it's a tranquilizer. It's a coping skill. It's a coping ability by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is most pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without complaining to anyone, right? The situation is not in your control anyway, right? You don't have control to change the situation. You do control your response to the situation, right? And that response can secure your reward. So we don't want to act in a way where we lose that reward opportunity, right? So when we say words like, I can't take it anymore, what we're doing is we're clipping our wings from the potential expansion we could have experienced. And that's why we have the words, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Allah gives us those words so that we have a coping mechanism, an ability to channel our sabr potential in a way that secures our reward and also soothes the pain. It also soothes the blow of that shocking news, right? Of that raw hurt at the first moment of receiving that painful news, right? So we don't want to clip our wings, but that's exactly what we do when we speak words of impatience, like I can't take it anymore. You're actually actively cutting your potential. You're stunting your potential when you say words like that. So instead of I can't take it anymore, the Quran says, say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, which is not just said at, upon the death of someone. You can use it for anything that is difficult on the soul to bear, any type of loss, any difficult news, right? You can seek refuge in those words to maximize the reward for yourself, right? And to become absorptive in difficult situations. That's the gist of patience, absorbing the pain within yourself versus letting it all out in regrettable bouts of anger, ingratitude, complaining. So yeah, sabr requires suffering internally to some degree. But that suffering, that pain, because we're human beings, we feel this pain, we do suffer, but it is made manageable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we turn to Him. There's no one else who can make it manageable, who can make it bearable. Knowing La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha, knowing that Allah does not bear a soul beyond what it can bear, right? And that's why after Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, the verse that comes after that speaks about the fruits of that statement for those people, right? That the salawat are upon them, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with them. So, yes, there is suffering. There's internal suffering, there's internal pain. Sabr doesn't mean that that suffering is extinguished. It certainly is not. The pain is not extinguished. And Yaqub alayhi salam, is a perfect example of that. How he suffers greatly, at the same time is greatly patient as well, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so cherishes that sabr for his sake, to remain, to act with grace upon receiving difficult news or in a difficult situation. Why? Because ultimately that situation is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you don't want to act in a way that shows displeasure against the decisions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And if you're able to do that by Allah's tawfiq, Allah loves you, because along with the muhsineen, Allah loves the sabirin. And they are that category, therefore, of special people who have a reward that cannot be measured. إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. That indeed, surely the sabirun, those who are patient, are going to receive a reward without measure, a reward that cannot be measured. You know, something so special, it cannot be quantified, it cannot be explained in human language. So there's no attempt to do so. It just says بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ, right? Without any measure. So we see Yusuf, Yaqub alayhi salam, now that the situation has intensified, the loss of Yusuf is compounded with the loss of Binyamin and the other elder brother also, who stayed back now. What does he do? The only thing that you can do, right? The only thing you should do is turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without despairing. Rather, combining his beautiful patience, sabrun jameel, with an expression of high hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will return Yusuf alayhi salam and his brothers back to him, right? Jami'a, Yusuf and Binyamin and Rubil or Yehuda, the eldest brother that is also now left behind in Egypt, right? He's begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring all three sons back to him. He's not stingy in his dua, subhanAllah, because he knows he's not making dua to himself. He's making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone else would be like, what? You're making dua that Yusuf is going to come back? You know, it's been, 20 years? But subhanAllah, the prophets of Allah, because of the knowledge they have, know that you never give up hope. And you continue to make dua with hope. And that's exactly what we see him doing, begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring back all three of them. Because he is Al-Alim Al-Hakim. And we'll stop here and we'll pick up with this verse in order to, inshallah, explain the last part about the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Alim and Al-Hakim next time, inshallah. So I don't want to keep you back. I know I did that a couple weeks ago and I'm not going to do it again. So inshallah, with that, we pause here. Jazakallah khair for listening so beautifully. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the Quran the spring of our hearts and allow us to practice it in our daily lives, so we become more beautiful in every way in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. For those of you that are in the area, we do have a live halaqah tomorrow in Princeton. So those of you who are in New Jersey or close by are welcome to join us at Princeton tomorrow. Inshallah, we'll post the halaqah details in our group, in the WhatsApp group. So hope to see you tomorrow, inshallah. Subhanaka wa bihamdika la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.